Kael'thar stood before the observation window of the Sentinel's eye, watching the stars drift past in their eternal silence. His reflection stared back at him, the pale blue skin and large dark eyes of his species marking him as Valorian. Behind him, the council chamber hummed with the quiet efficiency of a civilization that had left chaos behind 10,000 years ago. "You understand the importance of this assignment?" Council Director Venra said, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had never raised it in anger. "Humanity stands at a crossroads. The Council must decide if they are ready to join us or if they remain too primitive, too violent for membership." Kael'thar turned from the window. "I understand. You want me to observe them during their conflict with the Kreth Dominion, to document their military capabilities and cultural practices during warfare." "Precisely. You are our most objective researcher. Your reports on the Delthani migration crisis were exemplary in their detachment." Venra folded her hands, a gesture of finality. "We need that same clarity now. Can humanity be trusted? Or are they simply well-armed primitives who will destabilize the galactic order?" The assignment file appeared on Kael'thar's datapad. He scanned it quickly. He would be embedded on a human vessel called the Defiant, a military cruiser currently engaged in patrol operations near the conflict zone. The ship carried a crew of 312 humans. The file included cultural briefings, linguistic programs, and safety protocols. "When do I leave?" he asked immediately. "The transport is waiting." 3 days later, Kael'thar materialized on the hangar deck of the Defiant. The space was loud, chaotic, and smelled of something he couldn't identify. Machines roared. Humans in dark blue uniforms rushed past carrying equipment. Someone was shouting orders over the noise. It was completely unlike the ordered silence of Valorian ships. A human approached him, hand extended. Kael'thar recognized the greeting gesture from his briefings and mimicked it awkwardly. The human's grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Welcome aboard. I'm Captain Greg Hamilton." The human was older, his face lined with creases that the file said indicated age and stress. His hair was gray at the temples. His eyes were a pale blue, and they studied Kael'thar with open curiosity. "We've prepared quarters for you. My crew has been briefed to cooperate with your research." "I appreciate your hospitality," Kael'thar said, his translator rendering his words in the human language called English. "I will endeavor to remain unobtrusive." Hamilton smiled, an expression Kael'thar found difficult to interpret. "Something tells me that'll be easier said than done. Come on, I'll give you the tour." The ship was smaller than Kael'thar expected, and every space seemed to serve multiple purposes. The corridors were narrow, forcing people to turn sideways when they passed each other. Yet the humans seemed unbothered, often stopping to exchange words or brief physical contacts on the shoulder or arm. Hamilton introduced him to the senior staff. Lieutenant Maya Brooks, the tactical officer, was a woman with dark skin and sharp, intelligent eyes. She shook his hand with professional efficiency and immediately returned to her work. Dr. Lisa Monroe, the medical officer, was warmer, asking about Valorian physiology with genuine interest. Corporal Nick Torres, who commanded one of the Marine squads, was young, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen combat. He looked at Kael'thar with poorly concealed skepticism. "So you're here to judge us," Torres said. It wasn't a question. "I'm here to observe and document," Kael'thar corrected. "The Council requires accurate information to make informed decisions." "Right, accurate information." Torres glanced at Hamilton, then back to Kael'thar. "Well, stick close and keep your head down if things get hot. We'll try to keep you in one piece." Over the following days, Kael'thar settled into a routine. He observed. He recorded. He took notes on everything. The humans were fascinating in their inefficiency. They gathered in a common area they called the mess hall to consume food together, even though it would be more efficient to eat at their stations. They decorated their small quarters with images of other humans, places, objects that held some personal meaning. They engaged in recreational activities that served no practical purpose, like competitive games and creative pursuits. What struck him most was their constant emotional expression. They laughed frequently, often at things Kael'thar's translator couldn't properly contextualize. They expressed frustration, joy, affection, irritation, all with the same casual openness. His people had moved past such volatile emotional displays. The Valorians were calm, rational, measured. These humans were like children in comparison. Yet they performed their duties with surprising competence. Lieutenant Brooks could calculate trajectory solutions in her head faster than some computers. Dr. Monroe's medical knowledge was extensive. Even the lower-ranked crew members showed initiative and adaptability that impressed him. On his 5th day aboard, Kael'thar sat in the mess hall eating a meal that had been specially prepared to match his dietary requirements. A young crew member named Jake sat down across from him without asking permission. "Mind if I join you?" Jake asked, though he was already sitting. "I do not mind," Kael'thar said. "Must be weird for you being here. I mean, we're pretty different from your people, right?" "There are notable differences, yes," Jake grinned. "That's one way to put it. I read about Valorians in school. You guys haven't had a war in something like 10,000 years. That's insane. We can't go 10 years without something blowing up somewhere. Your species does seem prone to conflict." "Yeah, well," Jake shrugged, eating his food. "Somebody's got to keep the universe interesting. If everyone was as peaceful as you folks, the galaxy would be pretty boring." Kael'thar considered this. "You view warfare as entertainment?" "What? No, man. I'm just saying. Look, I don't like fighting. Nobody here does. But sometimes you gotta stand up for what's right. The Kreth are butchers. They don't negotiate, they don't compromise. They just take and kill. Somebody's gotta stop them. The Council believes in diplomatic solutions." Jake's expression hardened slightly. "How's that working out?" "Last I heard, the Council's been negotiating, while the Kreth have taken 12 colony systems. My cousin lived on New Harmony." Lived. Past tense. Before Kael'thar could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. The lighting changed to red. Humans moved with sudden purpose, abandoning meals and rushing to stations. Jake was gone in an instant, leaving his half-eaten food behind. Kael'thar stood uncertainly until a hand gripped his arm. "Captain Hamilton, come with me. Stay on the bridge where we can keep an eye on you." The bridge was organized chaos. Crew members called out information in rapid succession. Screens displayed data that shifted too quickly for Kael'thar to process. Hamilton dropped into his command chair with practiced ease. "Report," he snapped. "Distress signal from New Providence Colony." Lieutenant Brooks said, her fingers dancing across her console. "They're under attack. 3 Kreth warships. The colony's shields are failing. How long until they're overrun?" "Estimates say 4 hours. Maybe less." Hamilton didn't hesitate. "Set course for New Providence. Maximum speed." Kael'thar felt obligated to speak. "Captain, the file indicates your ship is not designed for capital ship engagement. 3 Kreth warships would significantly outmatch your capabilities." Hamilton looked at him, and Kael'thar saw something in those human eyes that he didn't have words for. "There are people." A logical assessment of the situation suggests, "I don't care what logic suggests." Hamilton's voice was firm but not angry. "There are 15,000 colonists on New Providence. Men, women, children. We're the closest ship. We're going." "You will likely die," Kael'thar said. Hamilton turned back to his screens. "Maybe. But we're going anyway." The Defiant accelerated, and Kael'thar gripped the railing to steady himself. Around him the crew worked with grim determination. No one questioned the order. No one suggested retreat or alternative strategies. They simply prepared for battle against impossible odds. Lieutenant Brooks caught his eye. "You might want to find something to hold on to. It's going to get rough." Kael'thar activated his recording equipment, ensuring every sensor was functioning. This was why he was here, to observe humans in their element, to document their approach to warfare. As he watched the crew prepare, he felt something unfamiliar in his chest. His people had evolved past such feelings, he told himself. This was merely sympathetic stress response, nothing more. The colony appeared on the viewscreen ahead, a small blue-green world wreathed in fire and smoke. 3 massive Kreth vessels orbited it like predators circling wounded prey, their weapons tearing into the surface. Hamilton's voice was steady. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Let's go save some lives." The Defiant dove toward the inferno, and Kael'thar's objective documentation began in earnest. He told himself he was merely an observer. He told himself he would remain detached and clinical. He told himself this was simply data collection. He was wrong on all counts. The Defiant shook as it entered the combat zone. Kael'thar gripped the bridge railing tighter, his recording equipment tracking everything. The 3 Kreth warships were massive, each one twice the size of the human vessel. Their hulls were dark, organic-looking, covered in chitinous plating that reflected the fire from the dying colony below. Kreth vessels are turning toward us, Lieutenant Brooks reported. Her voice was calm, professional. They're locking weapons. Evasive pattern delta, Captain Hamilton ordered. Get us between them and the colony. Buy the people on the ground sometime. The ship lurched sideways. Kael'thar's stomach protested. Around him, humans worked their stations as energy weapons streaked past on the view screen. Several shots hit the hull and the ship groaned like a living thing in pain. Shields at 60%, someone called out. Return fire. Target their weapons arrays. Brooks, I need solutions, not problems. Working on it, sir. Brooks's fingers moved across her console faster than Kael'thar thought possible. Recommend we vent drive plasma from port side, create a false heat signature, make them think we're more damaged than we are. Do it. Kael'thar watched, fascinated despite himself. The tactical display showed the Defiant bleeding what appeared to be critical fluids into space. The Kreth ships adjusted their formation, clearly expecting an easy kill. But it was a deception. The moment they committed, Hamilton ordered a full weapons barrage at the nearest ship's exposed flank. The Kreth vessel shuddered under the impact. Not destroyed, but hurt. They're angry now, Brooks said with grim satisfaction. Good. Angry enemies make mistakes. Hamilton leaned forward in his chair. How many people have we gotten off the surface? Transport ships are loading now, the communications officer reported. They need 10 more minutes. Then we give them 10 minutes. Hamilton looked at Kael'thar. You might want to document this part carefully. This is what we do. The next several minutes defied Kael'thar's understanding of tactical logic. The Defiant should have retreated, should have called for reinforcements, should have done anything except what it did, which was to position itself between 3 superior warships and a defenseless colony, absorbing punishment that was slowly tearing it apart. Shields at 20%. Hull breach on Deck 7. Fire suppression systems offline in engineering. The reports came one after another, each one marking another step toward destruction. Yet the crew never wavered. They plugged gaps, rerouted systems, and kept fighting. Kael'thar recorded it all. His scientific detachment struggling against something else, something his people had evolved past. Captain, Brooks said quietly, even if we hold them off, we're not getting out of here. Not without help. I know, Hamilton said. But those transports will. The words hung in the air. Kael'thar understood their meaning. The captain was accepting death for himself and his crew to save strangers on the surface. It was illogical, wasteful, admirable in a way that made his chest hurt. Sir, I'm getting something strange, the sensor operator said. The Kreth are pulling back their ground forces. They're returning to their ships. Hamilton straightened. Why would they do that? Kael'thar studied his own sensors and felt a cold certainty settle over him. They're preparing to destroy the colony from orbit. They've decided the ground assault is taking too long. How long until they're in position? 3 minutes. Perhaps less, Hamilton's jaw tightened. What's the status of the evacuation? Transports are at 70% capacity. There are still thousands of people down there. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Kael'thar watched Hamilton's face, saw the calculation happening behind those human eyes. The math was simple. The transports needed more time. The Kreth wouldn't give it. The only way to stop them was to do something dramatic. Corporal Torres, Hamilton said into his communication device. I need you in the hangar bay. Full combat load. You're going down to the surface. On the bridge speaker, Torres's voice crackled. Sir, if the Kreth start orbital bombardment while we're down there, they won't. Because we're going to make sure they're too busy to aim at anything but us. Hamilton looked at Kael'thar. You wanted to observe humans at war. Torres is taking a team down to hold the evacuation site while the transports finish loading. You're going with them. Kael'thar's translator struggled with his response. That seems unnecessarily dangerous, probably. But you'll see things from the ground that you can't see from up here. That's what you're here for, isn't it? Accurate observations? Hamilton's expression softened slightly. I won't order you to go. But if you want to understand who we are, that's where you need to be. 10 minutes later, Kael'thar found himself strapped into a dropship next to 12 human Marines. Corporal Torres sat across from him, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. The other Marines did the same, their movements synchronized through repetition. First time in combat? Torres asked him. Yes, my people do not engage in warfare. Lucky you. Torres locked a power cell into his rifle. Stay close to me when we hit the ground. Don't touch anything that looks weird. If I tell you to get down, you get down immediately. Understand? I understand. The dropship launched, and Kael'thar's stomach lurched again. Through the viewport, he could see the colony burning. Smoke rose from dozens of fires. Buildings were reduced to rubble. The Kreth had been thorough in their destruction. They landed hard in what had once been a public square. Now it was a refugee camp. Thousands of humans crowded around transport ships, pushing forward with desperate urgency. Children cried. Adults shouted. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Torres and his Marines deployed with swift efficiency, forming a perimeter around the landing zone. Kael'thar followed, his recording equipment active, capturing everything. Move it, people, Torres shouted. Get on the transports. Kids and injured first. Everyone else, stay calm and keep moving. A transport lifted off, its hull scarred by weapons fire. Another landed immediately to take its place. The evacuation was working, but it was slow. Too slow. Contact, one of the Marines yelled. Kael'thar turned and saw them. Kreth soldiers emerging from the ruined buildings. They looked like nightmares made flesh. Insectoid creatures moving on four legs with weapons grafted to their forelimbs. Their mandibles clicked as they advanced. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening. Energy weapons cracked. Projectile weapons thundered. The Kreth returned fire, and Kael'thar saw a Marine fall. His armor smoking from a direct hit. Torres was everywhere at once, directing fire, pulling wounded civilians to safety, maintaining the defensive line. Another Marine, a woman named Sophie Grant, set up a heavy weapon and began systematically destroying Kreth soldiers with calm precision. We need to fall back, someone shouted. Not yet. Torres fired his weapon, dropped an empty power cell, loaded a new one without looking. We've got 3 more transports to load. A building collapsed nearby, sending debris raining down. Kael'thar dove for cover next to Torres, his recording equipment somehow still functioning despite his terror. You all right? Torres asked, firing around the corner of their cover. I believe so. Good. Stay there. Torres looked at his Marines, counting heads. His face went tight. Sophie, time to go. Sophie Grant didn't respond immediately. She was still firing her weapon, keeping the Kreth pinned down. Then she spoke, and her voice was steady. Sir, they're massing for a push. If they break through, they'll reach the civilians. That's why we're pulling back together. No time. Sophie adjusted her weapon's targeting system. I can hold them here for maybe 5 minutes. That'll give you time to get everyone loaded. Kael'thar understood what she was saying. She was volunteering to stay behind. To die. Sophie, no, Torres said. That's an order. Sorry, sir. Can't hear you. Comms must be damaged. Sophie looked back at them, and she was smiling. Actually smiling. Tell my mom I love her. And if anyone names their kid Sophie after this, tell them to spell it right. Sophie. Not Sophia, not Sophia. Sophie. Torres hesitated, torn between duty to his Marine and duty to the civilians. Kael'thar saw the moment he made his decision, saw it break something inside the human. 5 minutes. Torres said quietly. You hold for 5 minutes, we'll have everyone out. 5 minutes. I can do that. Sophie checked her ammunition. Go, now. Torres grabbed Kael'thar and pulled him back toward the landing zone. The other Marines followed, helping wounded civilians, carrying children, maintaining discipline even as everything crumbled around them. The last transport was loading. Kael'thar looked back and saw Sophie Grant alone at her position, firing methodically at the advancing Kreth. She was 23 years old, according to his files. She had planned to study medicine after her military service. She had a brother and 2 sisters. She liked to paint in her spare time. Now she was going to die. The transport lifted off with Kael'thar aboard. Through the viewport, he saw Sophie still fighting. Then he saw the Kreth overwhelm her position. Next to him, Torres sat with his head in his hands. The other Marines were silent. One of them was crying. She bought us the time, Jake said quietly. He was there, Kael'thar realized. The young human from the mess hall. His face was blackened with smoke. Everyone got out. Not everyone, Torres said. Back on the Defiant, Kael'thar sat in his quarters, staring at his recordings. His hands shook, which shouldn't be possible. His people did. The Defiant survived, but barely. 2 days after the battle at New Providence, Kael'thar walked through corridors scarred by fire and emergency repairs. Entire sections of the ship were sealed off, too damaged to use. The crew had lost 37 people, including Sophie Grant. 314 colonists had been saved. Kael'thar tried to process this equation, but his mind rejected it. Was this a victory? The humans seemed to think so, even as they mourned their dead. In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Monroe moved between beds with mechanical efficiency. She had been working for 48 hours without rest. Her hands shook as she checked a patient's vital signs, but she refused to stop when Kael'thar suggested she sleep. "There are wounded crew members who need me," she said simply, moving to the next bed. "I'll rest when they're stable." "You are compromising your own health." "Probably." She didn't look at him. "But they bled for this ship. I can lose a little sleep." Kael'thar watched her work, recording everything. The humans in the beds bore terrible injuries, yet most of them tried to smile when Dr. Monroe approached. One man, missing his left arm, joked about finally having an excuse to avoid paperwork. Monroe laughed, a short, exhausted sound, and told him he'd have to learn to write with his other hand. This was incomprehensible. They joked about trauma. They found humor in horror. Kael'thar's research indicated this was a coping mechanism, but understanding it intellectually didn't help him process it emotionally. Later that day, Kael'thar requested a meeting with Captain Hamilton. He found the captain in his office, a small room barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs. The walls were covered with images, humans of various ages smiling at the camera. "My family," Hamilton said, noticing Kael'thar's interest. "Some are still around, some aren't." He pointed to one image in particular, a young woman with Hamilton's eyes and a bright smile. "That's my daughter, Katie. She was on a colony the Kreth hit 5 years ago. We got there too late." Kael'thar's translator struggled with the appropriate response. "I apologize for your loss." "Thank you." Hamilton gestured to a chair. "What can I do for you?" "I am attempting to understand something. You risked your entire ship and crew to save those colonists. Logic would suggest you should have called for reinforcements and waited for a more favorable tactical situation. Logic doesn't account for people dying while you wait for backup. But you lost 37 crew members. Sophie Grant died on the surface." Hamilton's expression hardened. "I know. I signed the casualty reports myself. I'll be writing letters to their families tonight. Does this not indicate that your approach was flawed? That a more cautious strategy would have preserved more lives?" Hamilton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. "Maybe. Probably. But those 314 colonists are alive because we didn't wait." Sophie knew what she was doing. She made her choice. They all did. Your species makes choices that prioritize strangers over your own survival. This is inefficient. "Yeah, well," Hamilton smiled without humor, "maybe that's what makes us human. What good is survival if you lose what makes you worth surviving?" Kael'thar left the meeting more confused than when he entered. He retreated to his quarters and reviewed his notes, trying to find patterns, trying to apply logic to a species that seemed to actively resist it. The next day, the crew held a memorial service. Kael'thar attended, standing at the back of the crowded room. Captain Hamilton spoke about each of the fallen, mentioning personal details that seemed irrelevant to their military function. Sophie Grant had loved old movies and terrible puns. A man named Carlos had been learning to play guitar. Another woman named Chen had been weeks away from retirement. Then something unexpected happened. The crew began to tell stories. Happy stories. Funny stories. Someone described the time Sophie had accidentally sealed herself in an airlock and had to be rescued. Another person talked about Carlos playing his guitar badly at 3 in the morning, making everyone laugh and complain simultaneously. They cried while they laughed. They laughed while they cried. Kael'thar couldn't reconcile these opposing emotional states. His recording equipment captured everything, but he knew the council would never truly understand this moment. After the service, Corporal Torres approached him. The Marine's eyes were red, his face drawn. "You recorded all that?" Torres asked. "Yes, for my report." "Good. Make sure the council knows. Sophie didn't die for nothing." "None of them did." Torres looked away. "I keep thinking I should have pulled her out. Should have ordered her to retreat. She refused to follow that order." "I know, but I'm her commanding officer. I'm responsible." Kael'thar thought carefully before speaking. "She chose to sacrifice herself. You allowed her that choice. Is this not honoring her agency as an individual?" Torres looked at him with something like surprise. That's a pretty philosophical way to look at it. I am attempting to understand. Yeah, Torres managed a small smile. You're trying. I appreciate that. The Defiant rendezvoused with a human fleet 2 days later. Kael'thar requested permission to transfer to the command ship to observe the military planning sessions. Hamilton approved, arranging transport. The fleet flagship was enormous compared to the Defiant. Kael'thar found himself in a conference room with dozens of human officers, all studying tactical displays and arguing strategies. At the head of the table sat Admiral Patricia Cole, a woman with silver hair and sharp, calculating eyes. "Welcome, Observer Kael'thar," she said, her tone polite but cool. "Captain Hamilton speaks highly of your conduct during the New Providence engagement. I understand you're here to determine if we're civilized enough for the Council. I am here to observe and document. The Council will make determinations based on my reports." "Fair enough." Cole turned back to the displays. "Then observe this. We're planning a major offensive at the Epsilon Crossing. The Kreth have fortified the system heavily. It's a strategic gateway. If we don't take it, they'll use it to push deeper into human space." Kael'thar studied the tactical situation. The Kreth had superior numbers and defensive positions. A conventional assault would be costly. "What is your projected casualty rate?" "High." Cole didn't elaborate. "But necessary. We can't let them keep that position." Over the next several hours, Kael'thar listened as the humans planned their attack. Their strategy was aggressive, almost reckless. They would use destroyer squadrons to draw fire while their capital ships pushed through. They would board and capture enemy vessels when possible. They would sacrifice their tactical advantages to maintain momentum. One admiral objected. "We'll lose dozens of ships with this plan. Thousands of personnel." Cole looked at him steadily. "Yes, but if we don't do this, they'll keep advancing. More colonies, more civilians. This ends here. At what cost?" "Whatever it takes." Cole's voice was final. "That's what war is. You pay the price they're not willing to." After the meeting, Kael'thar found himself in an observation lounge, staring at the stars. Lieutenant Maya Brooks from the Defiant appeared beside him. She had transferred to the flagship to assist with tactical planning. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" she said. "All those lives hanging on decisions made in comfortable rooms. You are involved in the planning. Does this not trouble you?" "Every day." Brooks pulled out a small image, a photograph of 2 other humans. "My wife and son. They're on Earth, safe for now." "Then why are you here? Why risk yourself?" Brooks smiled sadly. "So they never have to. So they can live in a universe where people like me already paid the price. That's how it works, isn't it? Each generation tries to make things safer for the next. Even if it costs you everything. Especially then." She tucked the photograph away. "My wife thinks I'm crazy for being out here. Maybe I am. But someone has to stand between them and things like the Kreth. Might as well be me." Kael'thar thought about his own people. The Valorians were safe, comfortable, advanced. But when was the last time any of them had risked anything for anyone? When had his species last cared enough about something to fight for it? "Your offensive will result in significant casualties," he said. "You know this, yet you proceed. The alternative is worse. The Kreth don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They take and kill until someone stops them. The Council keeps trying to talk with them. How's that working out?" Kael'thar had no answer. The Council had lost 12 systems to Kreth aggression, while attempting diplomatic solutions. "We're not fighting because we love war," Brooks continued. "We're fighting because we love what war tries to destroy." There's a difference. She left him alone with that thought. Kael'thar stood in the observation lounge for a long time, watching the fleet prepare for battle. Ships moved into formation. Supply vessels transferred ammunition and fuel. Medical ships positioned themselves for incoming casualties. Every human in this fleet knew what was coming. Knew the cost, knew that many of them wouldn't survive. Yet not one of them suggested retreat. Kael'thar tried to imagine his people doing the same. He couldn't. The Valorians would calculate the odds, determine the risk unacceptable, and seek alternative solutions. They would negotiate, compromise, retreat if necessary. The humans calculated the same odds and attacked anyway. Back in his quarters, Kael'thar attempted to write his daily report for the Council. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He kept seeing Sophie Grant's. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Epsilon crossing system, and immediately, Everything became chaos. Kael'thar stood on the command deck of the flagship, watching screens fill with tactical data. The Kreth Armada was already moving to intercept. Over 300 ships on each side, preparing to tear each other apart. Admiral Patricia Cole sat in her command chair, her expression calm despite the situation. Around her, officers called out information in rapid succession. Enemy positions, fleet formations, weapon ranges, time to engagement. All ships, this is Admiral Cole. She spoke into the fleet-wide channel. You know what we're here to do. You know what it's going to cost. But those people on the colonies behind us are counting on us. So let's make it count. All ships execute Plan Ragnarok. Kael'thar had reviewed Plan Ragnarok during the briefing. It was insane. The human fleet would split into 3 groups. The first group, composed of destroyers and light cruisers, would charge directly at the Kreth lines. They would draw fire, absorb damage, and create chaos. They were meant to die. While the Kreth focused on them, the capital ships would punch through the weakened sections. It was a strategy built on sacrifice. The humans in those destroyers knew they were being sent to their deaths. Yet when the order came, they accelerated toward the enemy without hesitation. First wave is engaging, Lieutenant Brooks reported from her tactical station. She had transferred to the flagship temporarily to coordinate the assault. Destroyer group taking heavy fire. Kael'thar watched the tactical display. Small icons representing human ships blinked and disappeared one by one. Each icon was a ship. Each ship held crew. Each crew member was a person with a life, a history, families waiting at home. We've lost the Valiant, someone reported. The Courage is venting atmosphere. The Steadfast is breaking apart. The reports continued, a steady stream of death. Cole's expression never changed. She watched the tactical display, made small adjustments to the fleet formation, and accepted the losses without comment. Second wave. Execute breakthrough, she ordered. The capital ships surged forward, massive vessels pushing through the gap the destroyers had created with their lives. Weapons fire lit up space like a storm. Ships died on both sides, but the humans were paying the higher price. We're through their first line, Brooks said. Capital ships engaging their command vessels. Good. All fighters launch. Target their carrier groups. Small craft poured from the human ships, thousands of tiny single-pilot vessels swarming toward enemy carriers. Kael'thar watched one fighter squadron dive directly into enemy fire, losing half their number in seconds. The survivors pressed on. The flagship shook as enemy weapons found their mark.
Shields holding, someone called out.
Forward batteries returning fire. Kael'thar gripped the railing, his recording equipment capturing everything. This was warfare on a scale his people had never experienced. The Valorians had left this behind millennia ago. They had evolved past it, or so they claimed. Watching it now, Kael'thar wondered if they had truly evolved or simply forgotten. Admiral, the communications officer said urgently, the Defiant is requesting permission to execute a boarding action. They've crippled a Kreth carrier. Cole didn't hesitate. Approved. Tell Captain Hamilton to take that ship and make it count. Kael'thar felt his chest tighten. The Defiant was still out there, still fighting despite its damage from New Providence. Captain Hamilton and his crew diving back into danger. I need to be on that ship, Kael'thar heard himself say, for my observations. Cole looked at him, her expression unreadable. You understand they're boarding a Kreth carrier. Close combat, brutal, you might not come back, I understand. But I must observe. Fine. We'll get you shuttled over. Try not to die. The council would probably complain about the paperwork. 20 minutes later, Kael'thar materialized on the Defiant's hangar deck. The ship looked worse than when he'd left it. New damage scarred its hull. Emergency repairs were visible everywhere. But the crew moved with the same determined efficiency he remembered. Corporal Torres met him, suited in heavy combat armor. You picked a hell of a time to visit. We're about to board that Kreth carrier. You coming? Yes. Torres tossed him a protective vest. Put this on. Won't stop much, but it's better than nothing. Stay behind me, do exactly what I say, and try not to get killed. The boarding craft launched, carrying Torres, his Marine squad, and one terrified Valorian observer. They crossed the gap between ships under fire, the small vessel shaking from near misses. Then they hit the Kreth carrier's hull, cutting torches burning through the armor plating. Go, 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 Torres shouted. The Marines poured through the breach, weapons firing immediately. Kael'thar followed, his recording equipment active despite his terror. The interior of the Kreth ship was dark, organic, humid. It smelled of something chemical and wrong. Kreth soldiers came at them from everywhere. The Marines fought with brutal efficiency, but it wasn't clean or easy. This wasn't warfare at a distance. This was hand-to-hand, desperate, primal. A Marine next to Kael'thar took a direct hit and went down. Another Marine dragged the wounded man back while maintaining fire. Torres moved like someone born for this, his weapons barking as he cleared rooms and corridors. Kael'thar followed, recording everything, his scientific objectivity completely shattered by the raw violence around him. They fought their way to the carrier's engineering section. Marines placed explosive charges on critical systems. The Kreth counterattacked in force, and the Marines formed a defensive line. "Hold here," Torres ordered. 30 seconds until those charges blow. The seconds felt like hours. Kael'thar crouched behind cover, watching Marines fight and bleed. One young man, barely past adolescence, took a hit to the chest. His armor cracked. He fell. "Kyle." Torres scrambled to him, dragging him to cover. Kael'thar saw the damage. It was fatal. Torres must have known it too, but he held the boy's hand anyway. "Sorry, sir," Kyle Peters gasped, blood on his lips. "Couldn't finish the mission. You did fine, kid. You did fine." Torres's voice was steady, but Kael'thar saw his hands shaking. "Tell my mom." Kyle's eyes were distant. "Tell her I wasn't scared. I will. I promise." Kyle Peters died at age 19. Kael'thar recorded it. He would never forget the look on Torres's face. "Charges set," someone yelled. "We need to go." They ran back through the corridors they'd fought to reach, Kreth soldiers pursuing. They made it to the boarding craft with seconds to spare. The explosions behind them turned the carrier's engineering section into an inferno. Back on the Defiant, Kael'thar sat in the medical bay, watching Dr. Monroe work on the wounded Marines. Half of Torres's squad was dead or critically injured. The survivors sat in silence, their faces blank with shock and grief. "You all right?" Torres asked him, his armor still scorched from the fighting. "I am uninjured." "That's not what I asked." Kael'thar looked at his hands. They were shaking. "I have never witnessed such violence. Such loss. Yeah, welcome to war." Torres sat down heavily, removing his helmet. His face was streaked with sweat and soot. "This is what it actually looks like. Not the tactical displays and casualty statistics. This, people dying in your arms, friends burning alive. Kids like Kyle apologizing for not finishing the mission while they bleed out. Yet you continue. You keep fighting. What choice do we have? The Kreth won't stop because we're tired of fighting. They'll just kill more people." The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, the humans held Epsilon Crossing. The Kreth fleet was destroyed or routed, but the cost was staggering. The human fleet had lost 78 ships. More than 15,000 personnel were dead. Twice that number were wounded. Then came the word that shattered what remained of Kael'thar's composure. Admiral Cole's flagship had been destroyed in the final push. The admiral had stayed at her post, coordinating the fleet's actions until the last moment. She could have evacuated. There was time. But she chose to remain, ensuring the damaged ships could retreat in order. Kael'thar accessed the recording of her final transmission. Her voice was steady, professional, accepting. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole. We've achieved our objective. Well done. Now get our people home." Cole out, then nothing. The flagship exploded, taking the admiral and her entire bridge crew with it. The fleet limped back to friendly space, wounded and grieving. On the Defiant, Captain Hamilton gathered his crew for another memorial service. More names, more stories, more loss. Kael'thar attended, standing in the back. He couldn't stop shaking. His recording equipment had captured everything, but he knew the data couldn't convey the reality. Numbers and images couldn't express the weight of what he'd witnessed. After the service, Lieutenant Maya Brooks found him in an observation lounge. She looked different, hollow. Her movements were mechanical. "My wife," she said without preamble. "The Kreth hit Earth, retaliatory strike. She was in the target zone." Kael'thar's translator failed. He had no words. "I should have been there," Brooks continued, her voice empty. "I was out here planning battles while she died. I should have been there. You were preventing more deaths. Your work saved countless lives, just not the one that mattered." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "You're going to report back to your council, aren't you? Tell them about us. About what you saw, yes." Kael'thar returned to the Sentinel's Eye 3 weeks after the battle at Epsilon Crossing. His quarters felt alien now, too clean and orderly. The silence bothered him. On human ships, there was always noise. Always activity, always life. Here, everything was efficient and sterile and dead. He sat at his workstation surrounded by data, recordings, statistics, casualty reports, images of faces he would never forget. Sophie Grant laughing before she died. Kyle Peters apologizing. Admiral Cole's final transmission. Lieutenant Brooks staring at nothing, her grief a tangible thing. The council wanted his report. They wanted him to answer their question with scientific objectivity and clinical detachment. Are humans ready to join the galactic community, or are they too violent, too primitive, too dangerous? Kelthar tried to write. His hands shook. He would start a sentence, then delete it. Start again. Delete again. How did he explain what he had witnessed? How did he make the council understand what their evolved civilization had forgotten? On his 4th day back, he received a message from Captain Hamilton. A simple text transmission. Thank you for bearing witness. We know it wasn't easy. Fair skies, friend. Kelthar read it 17 times, analyzing each word. The captain thanked him for observing their suffering. Called him friend. Wished him well despite knowing Kelthar's report might condemn humanity to continued isolation. He reviewed his recordings again, watching moments he had captured. Dr. Monroe singing softly to wounded soldiers. Torres carrying wounded Marines to safety despite his own injuries. Hamilton learning the names of new crew members, treating each one as important. Jake in the mess hall trying to make conversation with an alien observer who barely spoke to him. Small moments, meaningless in the grand tactical picture, but somehow they mattered more than the battles. The council summoned him on his 8th day back. He entered the chamber where he had received his assignment, facing the assembled representatives of 200 species. All of them peaceful, all of them civilized, all of them watching him with polite curiosity. Council Director Venra spoke first. Observer Kelthar, welcome back. We have reviewed your preliminary data. Most enlightening. The casualty rates alone suggest humanity remains far too violent for membership. Your observations confirm what many of us suspected, that humans are simply well-armed primitives. Kelthar said nothing. He activated his presentation, and the council chamber filled with images. The battle at New Providence, the boarding action on the Kreth carrier, the memorial services, the faces of the dead. As you can see, Venera continued, humanity engages in warfare with disturbing frequency and intensity. They accept casualties that any logical species would find unacceptable. They prioritize emotional responses over rational decision-making. They sacrifice themselves needlessly. Our conclusion seems clear. Kelthar found his voice. May I speak? Of course. Your direct observations will help us finalize our decision. He stepped forward, his legs steadier than he expected. You're right. Humans are violent. They fight wars that cost them dearly. They make decisions based on emotion rather than pure logic. They sacrifice themselves for strangers. All of this is true. Venra nodded approvingly. Precisely our concern. Such species cannot be trusted with. But you're asking the wrong question, Kelthar interrupted. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Interrupting was not done in civilized discourse. You want to know if humans are too dangerous, too violent, too primitive, but the real question is, when did we become too evolved to care? He pulled up another image. Sophie Grant, smiling as she volunteered to die. This is Sophie Grant, 23 years old. She stayed behind to hold off enemy forces so civilians could evacuate. She knew she would die. She smiled about it, made jokes. Then she died alone, buying 5 minutes for strangers to escape. Another image. Admiral Cole at her command post. Admiral Patricia Cole. She could have evacuated when her ship was dying. She stayed to coordinate the fleet's retreat, ensuring damaged vessels could escape in order. She paid for those lives with her own, image after image. Kyle Peters apologizing as he died. Captain Hamilton writing letters to families of the fallen. Dr. Monroe working 48 hours without rest. Torres carrying wounded Marines. Brooks returning to duty hours after learning her wife was dead. I watched humanity fight a war, Kelthar said. I documented their violence, their casualties, their tactical decisions. And I was horrified. Not by what they did, but by what it revealed about us. The council chamber was silent now. Kelthar felt his voice growing stronger. When was the last time any of us risked anything for anyone? When did we last care enough about something to fight for it? The Kreth have taken 12 systems from Council space. Our response has been to negotiate, retreat, and surrender territory. We call this wisdom. We call this evolution. But humanity calls it cowardice. That is inappropriate language, Venra said sharply. We have moved past such primitive concepts as cowardice and bravery. We have evolved. Have we? Or have we simply lost the capacity to care? Kylthar pulled up the tactical data from Epsilon Crossing. Humanity lost 15,000 people taking this system. They knew the cost before the battle began. They paid it anyway. Why? Because if they didn't, the Kreth would use that system to kill more civilians. Humans made a choice to bleed so strangers wouldn't have to. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had never known such choices. We evolved past warfare by evolving past the things worth fighting for. We don't form bonds strong enough to die for. We don't love with enough intensity to risk ourselves. We don't care about strangers enough to bleed for them. We call this progress. Humanity would call it death. You are being emotional, Venra said. This is unlike you, Kylthar. Perhaps your time with humans has compromised your objectivity. It has. Completely. Irreversibly. Kylthar didn't try to hide it. I went to observe humans at war. I wish I had never gone. Not because of what I saw them do, but because I can never unsee what we have become. He pulled up one final image. Lieutenant Brooks in the observation lounge, holding a photograph of her wife. She told me something. She said humans don't fight because they love war. They fight because they love what war tries to destroy. There's a difference. Kylthar turned back to the council. You want to know if humans are dangerous? Yes, they are terrifyingly dangerous. They will accept any cost, endure any suffering, sacrifice anything to protect what they love. They are unpredictable, emotional, and capable of horrifying violence. He paused, letting his next words carry weight. But they are also incorruptible. You cannot negotiate with them when they believe they're defending something that matters. You cannot intimidate them when they've already accepted death. You cannot break them because they value what they protect more than they value themselves. They are dangerous because they still care, because they still love, because they still believe some things are worth dying for. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members agreed with him. Others argued. Venra called for order, her expression troubled. What exactly are you recommending? She finally asked. Full membership, immediate integration, and fair warning to every species in this council. Kylthar felt something like a smile cross his face. Hope you never need to ask humans for help, because the price they pay to help is one we can no longer comprehend. But if you do need them, they will come. They will bleed. They will die for you, even though you would never do the same for them. The debate lasted for hours, days, weeks. Kylthar's report created a philosophical storm that shook the council's foundations. Some called him brilliant. Others called him compromised, emotional, unscientific. His career hung in the balance. He didn't care. He had seen something his species had forgotten existed, and he couldn't unsee it. The council finally reached a decision. Humanity would be granted provisional membership. Not because they were peaceful, but because the council needed to study them, needed to understand what they had lost, needed to remember what caring actually meant. Kylthar made an unauthorized trip back to human space. He found the Defiant in dry dock undergoing major repairs. Captain Hamilton was there overseeing the reconstruction. Kylthar, Hamilton said, surprise evident on his face. Didn't expect to see you again. I wanted to inform you personally. The council has granted humanity provisional membership. Hamilton's expression was complicated. That's good, I think. What made them decide? I told them the truth. That you're dangerous, violent, and completely irrational, and that these qualities make you more valuable than any of our evolved civilizations. Hamilton laughed, a genuine sound. Well, that's one way to get accepted. Thank you for understanding. I'm not certain I do understand, but I witnessed something I cannot forget. Kylthar hesitated. How do you continue? After everything you've lost? Hamilton looked at the ship being rebuilt around them. Because stopping means they died for nothing. We keep going. We rebuild. We remember. And we try to make sure their sacrifice meant something. Kylthar found Lieutenant Brooks at a memorial garden on Earth. She was planting a tree, her hand steady despite her loss. They told me you helped us, she said without looking up. That your report convinced the council to accept us.